Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this.
Mango. Ample and pendulous, the cold edge releases solar aromas. Sweet and pungent she deliberates, parting the exquisite flesh as juices moisten her fingers. An explosion of tactile delight as golden mouthfuls evaporate into the senses. Satiated, she reclines.
We've got a very special treat for you today on Ignite Intimacy, a different type of conversation here featuring Deleonora Abel, who is an Australian poet, novelist, and screenwriter, as well as an intrepid nomad, yogini, and astrologer. Deleonora holds a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature and History from the University of New England and studied screenwriting at Bond University. Her work has been described as in the style of l'écriture féminine. Her confessional stream of consciousness narrative is influenced by mythology, occult imagery, and the natural world. Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, Deleonora.
Thank you so much.
So, Mango, that is a pretty juicy poem.
It sure is. And it's one of the poems that gets the most oohs and ahs. Yeah. Yeah. Talk to us about this poem in particular. What inspired it? Well, I get asked that question a lot, and it was actually inspired after eating a mango. And it was just such a sensual experience. And, you know, you can only get mangoes in summer, so I was sort of hanging out for summer, and I went through this whole ritual with the knife and slicing it and eating it and devouring it, really. And it was a really juicy, sensual experience, and I felt really compelled to write about it. It's one of those sort of rare treats in our lives when we take time out to really be in the moment and engage all our senses. And there's a great quote I read recently by American writer Jim Harrison. And he says, "Food is a great literary theme. Food in eternity, food and sex, food and lust. Food is a part of the whole of life. Food is not separate." And I just love that quote because that really speaks to me about what inspired me with mango. I love that. I mean, I think of my own experiences devouring mangoes and, you know, I can liken it to what someone may experience when they're devouring a woman, you know, or a man. And yes. So, you know, it is this very sensual, juicy, yummy, delicious, sweet experience. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And yeah, so that was my inspiration. When people say, you know, what was your inspiration? Well, it was actually eating a mango. But yeah, there's all those layers to it, as you mentioned. And so tell us about your Dutch grandmother used to say about mangoes. Oh yeah, she called it angel's piss, which I think is so beautiful. Wow. She was a pretty amazing woman. I'm actually a first generation Australian, and she came out on a boat when she was 48 years old with only a few words of English, and she had a real fiery spirit, and she would just sort of say it how it was. And so she fell in love with mangoes quite later in life and shared my passion for it. But I just love that, don't you? Angel's piss. Yes, I love that. I love that. Well, and I'm thinking about your grandmother and how she immigrated to Australia from the Netherlands. Yes, yes. So was there a mass movement of people from Europe to Australia? Yeah, there were. And my parents came out on a boat as well. They were 21 and 23 respectively. And my grandmother came, I think, a couple of years later. So, yeah, there was mass immigration from Europe in the 50s, 60s to Australia and to America and Canada and New Zealand, South Africa. But my father always said we wanted to go somewhere warm. Because one of my uncles actually went to the States and settled in Texas. So I do have family in America, which is great.
That's really interesting. I love that. So bring us into the next piece.
Okay, the next piece, it's similar to Mango insofar as it was inspired by sort of getting into my five senses. I was lying on the beach. The poem is called Rebirth. So how about I read it first?
Yes. Read it and then we'll dive into it.
But yeah, certainly the sense of the elements. Rebirth. In her firm embrace, wet sand squelching between toes, I opened my arms to the dying sun as every pore on my skin, erect and taut, willed the heat to flush my senses, the weight of her, millennia old, cool and deep. I surrendered to the elements. Sharp breaths bathed in salt. The waves rise from my toes, snake between my thighs, penetrate my base, flood my limbs, until I'm reborn. The Mandarin horizon.
Millennia old, cool and deep, I surrendered to the elements.
Yeah, well, I was literally lying on the beach like a starfish. And something I like to do sometimes is go to the water's edge and get the soft, wet sand and do like a body scrub. Mm-hmm. And then I lay there literally like starfish, and I could feel fire, earth, air, water. So there was the sun bearing down and the water rushing between my legs. And the earth felt like Mother Earth holding me, and this soft breeze just caressing my skin. And yeah, it felt erotic. It definitely did. And just that beautiful connection to the elements. It was visceral and sensual. And I do write about this quite a bit, how I feel like we've lost that connection to our instinctual nature. You know, that we've lost that connection. And it's bizarre because in many ways we're over-connected. We've never been more connected with technology, and yet paradoxically we're disconnected. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And nature is such a powerful force. I mean, it's what moves all of us, nature.
Exactly.
And,
yes.
and nature can be so sensual and so erotic.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. That wild, instinctive yin side of ourselves that we forget about. And I had a friend recently who went down to South Australia, and she went hiking in quite a remote part of Australia. And when she came back, the thing that really hit me or made an impression was her excitement and her talking about how she was going back to ballet and this creative fire that was alive and all the things that she wanted to do. And we talked about how that time in that remote wilderness with no internet and just really immersing yourself in nature and, you know, getting those negative ions like you get down in the ocean and connecting with that, you know, sleeping with the cycles of old, like rising with the sun and going to bed with the sun. And we talked about that, and it was amazing how just that week in nature was so restorative for her. And I think that's the same for everyone, really.
God, that sounds heavenly. Rising with the sun, going to bed with the sun, you know, just gliding on the rhythms of the earth.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Gliding with the rhythms of the earth. That's wonderful. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your journey as a writer.
Well, I've always loved books and reading and writing, and I actually didn't set out to write a book of poetry. What happened was in 2013 I was made redundant and I was working at Bond University, and I decided that this was the time to fully immerse myself into my writing. I was made redundant. It was like the universe said, okay, you have a clear path. You're out of excuses. What are you going to do? And so I started traveling, actually. I wasn't feeling the urge to write. In fact, I had the worst case of writer's block. And I found some writing from 2014, actually only today, and I wrote, I'm not a writer. I don't want to write. In fact, I hate writing. And I went on this whole spiel about it. And what I knew I wanted to do was travel. So I traveled for a couple of years. And then I came back to Australia and the words started to come. And I was writing last year about my travel memoir. And I was halfway through the memoir and I had this sort of serendipitous thought. And the thought was, oh, why don't you put your poems together and put it in a book and just put it out into the universe? And because throughout my life, I've just been writing poetry really for myself as a catharsis. And so I had this collection of 20 years of poems, and I thought, yeah, I might put that together. And it was sort of like a sideline thing, but it became the main event because it got to the point where I had to put the memoir aside and fully focus on this, what I had wanted to create, and I had put all my energy into it over the years, and it was demanding my full attention. And so I went, okay, let's do this. And the Little Black Book of Verse was born. But so it's really a catalogue of stories, but for me it's my journey from girlhood to womanhood. And in many ways, I think it's every woman's journey. I put myself through college after becoming a single mother at 29, and do you know what I mean? So and then I nursed my mother when she had cancer, and then she died, and and then there were all these things that were happening in my life, but they're happening in everyone's life. We don't always talk about the taboo stuff, right? Like sex and death and grief and depression and abortion and all that stuff. We put that in the closet and we know it's happening, but we don't really want to discuss it, or we feel uncomfortable discussing it. And I needed an outlet for it. Especially after my mum died, I mean, they talk about the 5 stages of grief, but I was just fucking angry all the time for a long time. And writing has always been my creative outlet, my catharsis, my sanctuary, my haven, and it just feels like the timing's right now. And the book has kind of taken on a life of her own.
Yeah.
Which has been really lovely to watch. I really resisted it at first, but now I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Yes, I love that. And so I want to know, I'm sure our audience wants to know as well, just a little bit about, your journey through life. But I'm curious about something that you said a while back. I was made redundant.
Yeah, I lost my job at Bond University. I actually then was given it back, but by that stage I had already reoriented myself to leaving, and basically I sold pretty much everything I owned and packed up. My son was 18, 19 at the time, and I remember saying, you don't mind if I go off and explore too? I got his blessings. And so, yeah, I had felt this gnawing, insistent voice urging me to go. And even when I was working full time, I would come home, I would have a quick meal, and then I would write for 5 hours. And so I had already started this journey that I didn't know how exactly was going to play out, but I felt a real desire to write and to create and to communicate. And it's something that I had pretty much put the kibosh on for for decades. I mean, I was raised in a family where creativity, like the things that I loved, acting, dancing, writing, that's a hobby. That's not what you do in real life. You get a job, you go to college, you work in a bank, or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of fell into that, and I really struggled with that for many, many years. And ironically, it wasn't until I had my son that something really kind of woke up. And my son's a writer as well. And so it's like, children, they watch what you do, not so much what you say, right? That's where they're learning. So it was really important for me to be in congruence, my words and my actions. And if I'm saying to him, well, you're good at this, why don't you follow this and, work hard and do this. But if I'm not doing it, do you know what I mean? I really felt like, okay, I have a really great opportunity here to quit whinging about it and do it. And yes, it's scary. And yes, my God, I came up with excuses I didn't know I had. But my desire was, and my desire is stronger than my fear. And that's what propels me. I mean, it's like my mother, just before she died, she said to me, I haven't done anything with my life. And that was really hard to hear. And that was a hard conversation, wanting to acknowledge that sentiment and not diminish it and say, yeah, I hear that, but also then say, okay, well, let's look at what you have done. But those words, they kind of sunk a little hook in me, because I don't want to get to the end of my life and say I haven't done anything with my life, particularly creatively, because that was the thing that I was feeling restless and unhappy about and frustrated, because I kept putting blocks and barriers in the way, and I didn't really need to. And in 2013, it's like the universe said, okay, here you go. You're out of excuses. What are you going to do?
And so I'd love for you to read your next poem for us.
Okay. Fear. He fixes eyes of ochre on my visage, petrified like wood adrift at the mercy of his tidal whim. He dissects me with visceral deliberation, a connoisseur no less, of the mind as of the flesh. Choker adorned, my throat constricts, blood pumps, panicked, throbbing in my head. Am I dead? No, chérie, he smiles. Not yet, think I.
Tell us about fear.
I wrote Fear when I was at university and studying a short story called The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, and it's a modern twist on the fable Bluebeard. And it's set at a place called Mont Saint-Michel on the Normandy coast in France, and it looks like a castle on an island, and it's cut off at high tide. So it has all this wonderful imagery. And the thing I loved about the story is that the heroine ends up being saved by her mother and getting away from the clutches of this murderous husband. But it really reminded me of the myth of Persephone eating the pomegranate. Again, this going from girlhood to womanhood, of Eve eating the apple, and particularly the themes of eros and thanatos, sex and death, and how they're connected, and how the thing with Persephone is, once you've eaten the fruit, once you've tasted that life, it's like you're never the same again, and it changes you, and not necessarily in a bad way. But there's a lovely quote in the actual book, The Bloody Chamber, where the heroine says, "And for the first time in my innocent and confined life, I sensed in myself a potentiality for corruption that took my breath away." And I just love that sentence, because I think that speaks to that dark side that's in all of us, but we tend to repress it, reject it, project it. We don't really own it. And especially as women, I think owning that darkness, or that dark sexuality, is frowned upon. And the opposite of Eve is Lilith, who wanted to lie on top of Adam, and he didn't like that. That was unacceptable. So she was banished, and she's sort of revered as a demon goddess. So it's like if you're a woman in charge of your own sexuality, that can be perceived as quite threatening. But I loved the tension in the story, and it really captured my imagination. Yeah.
I just thinking about what you said just now about when a woman owns her sexuality, how that can be intimidating to others, or it can generate, fear in others. And I'm just so curious about that.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah. For example, it's like if a man has an affair, there seems to be an awful lot of energy directed at the other woman. Mm-hmm. But, no one put a gun to his head, and you know what I mean? Like, and yeah, it's even sort of, this is a bit oblique, but even with the current, the newly elected French President Macron, and the whole brouhaha about his wife being 24 years older, and if it was in reverse, gender-wise, it's just not a big deal. So that, there's all these assumptions and judgments about women and sexuality and their age and how it's expressed. And yeah, it's certainly something that I explore a lot in my writing. And I've certainly always felt the double standard. I have one sibling, a brother, and I know that he definitely got different messages from me. The only advice I got from my mother in terms of sexuality was be discreet and selective, and I was neither. So yeah, it's interesting. It's how I think we still have a long way to go, but I think books like short stories like The Bloody Chamber and my poem Fear, I guess we can start to have this conversation about female sexuality.
Yes, I had someone actually quite recently discover in my podcast, someone that I know through business discovered the podcast, and he said, wow, something along the lines of like, men must be really scared of you when they discover your podcast. Like, I guess the gist of it was that, let me see if I can find this message. He said, I just found it so interesting. Seriously, when you meet guys and they learn about your podcast, some of them must be scared, right? The ones who are not confident enough to face a strong woman, it must scare the shit out of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting.
So, I'm curious about this because I know for me, I want to be attracting men into my life that embrace that get turned on by that.
Yes, ditto, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to be with men who are confident in themselves and who love that as well. Mm-hmm. You don't want barefoot in the kitchen. Which was never me, even when I was pregnant.
Yep, exactly. So take us into the next realm here.
Okay, so the next poem is called Diaspora, and it has a unique genesis. I was actually at New York University taking some summer classes in 2014, and we were tasked to write a poem, and the assignment was pick an image, and here are a list of words. And the words were eyelid, lens, flower, idiot, monk, pillar, fool, jellyfish, and sea. So put the image and the words together and write a poem. The image I chose was one that my father took of my mother. They're newly married, 21 and 23, on a boat. I think it's a 2-month journey then to Australia.
Wow.
And a long journey. And she's leaning against the ship's balcony looking out to sea, and she has a sort of curious, wistful look on her face. I mean, they've left all their family and friends behind. They're going not just to another country, to the other side of the world with a new language. And I was trying to imagine what that would be like. So this is Diaspora. She didn't bat an eyelid, an instrument of his lens. He captured the moment like a budding flower, intent on solar rays. Those halcyon days. What lay ahead? An idiot, a fool may guess. She stands against a pillar still, like a monk in prayer, thinking of jellyfish in southern waters. These immigrants ashore for the day. They farewell the port and her treasures. Terra Australis awaits. She stands on the boat and stares out to sea, to a life that would ultimately deliver me.
That's powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. That's my son's favorite poem.
Yeah. I mean, this is the journey of the human, right? We don't know exactly what's coming, but we're looking ahead. We're looking into the future and saying, what is pulling me forward?
Yes. Yeah. What is that? I mean, it's the unknown. I mean, I can't think of a bigger unknown. And I mean, my parents have told me the stories over the years, and they were supposed to go to Melbourne, but they were told to go to Sydney because the weather was better. But then they were taken to like a migration camp, and they were there for a few weeks until they met some other couples from other European countries and found some accommodation. I think their first accommodation was 3 couples in a small flat in Sydney, and starting with, 20 pounds, like nothing, just carving a life out, and it's just so brave.
It's so brave.
Yeah, it's just an amazing thing that thousands of people have done and still do. When I was in Turkey a couple of years ago and Greece and Budapest, I saw a trail of Syrian immigrants with their whole lives on their back in Turkey, camping in makeshift tents and making a little fire. In Budapest, my son took me to the underground stations where they were staying and camping, and some volunteers showed cartoons for the kids, and there were grandmothers and babies and mothers and fathers and children, and it was very humbling for me. I realized, A, how lucky I am, and B, of course, it made me think of my own parents' journey, slightly different, of course, but and then I had to get on a train to go to Poland, and there was a whole confrontation between the Hungarian police and Syrian refugees. And I remember saying, there was a whole push and shove, and I remember saying to my son, please don't leave until I'm on that train. And I held up my Australian passport and my ticket and sort of pushing through the throng of people. And I felt so sad for the Syrian refugees. I felt so lucky that where I was born, right? It's what Warren Buffett calls, I think, the ovarian lottery, that I could get on that train. So that has also informed my writing, because as a first-generation Australian, I always felt different. I was tall. I looked a bit different. I had a Dutch accent when I started school because Dutch was my first language. While other kids were coming to school with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I had salami sandwiches, and, I was called salami eater, and
oh my gosh.
So I always had that sense of being a bit different. And my mother, God bless her, she used to always say, I'm a citizen of the world. And I love that, because we forget that we're all on planet Earth. We have these man-made borders and man-made rules and visas and paperwork and whatnot, but we're all part of humanity on the same planet, and we forget that. I think we get caught up in the differences rather than seeing how similar and how alike we are. When those kids in Budapest were laughing watching Tom and Jerry, you realise that we're all very similar. Do you know what I mean? Some of us are luckier than others, there's no doubt about it. But yeah, so yeah, diaspora is, it's very close to my heart.
Well, I'm thinking about your mother and your mother's journey and the journey that we as mothers go through with ourselves when we have children, the enormity of that responsibility when it settles in, it sets in, and you realize, oh my God, what have I done? And also, I mean, for me simultaneously, it was like, I've never received a gift like this. I've never felt a love like this. And holy shit, what have I done? Like, this is a responsibility I didn't feel prepared for. And then you journey through life, through all of the ups and downs and the delicacies of sex and sexuality and yourself as a mother and unwanted pregnancies and the desire to be pregnant, but maybe it's not happening. And I mean, it's just, there's so many layers. There's so many layers to it. And
it's fraught.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about your journey with your mother and from the shores of Australia, you know, from the boat, from, you know, looking forward into the future that was calling her, of which you were very much a part of that. And then navigating this new country and this new world and growing up being different and then coming to a place where your mother, the roles reversed and now you're caring for your mother.
Oh, yes. Yes. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer when she was 70. We'd actually just celebrated her 70th birthday in London where my brother lives. And we come home and the doctor basically said, well, there's nothing we can do. It's everywhere. Go home, be comfortable. And that was such a shock because my mother, you know, she practiced yoga and meditation and she ate well. And I used to joke that she'd get a telegram when she was 100 from King William.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I just expected her to be here. And it was just before my 40th birthday. And, you know, it's a big deal, 40. And, of course, the last thing I wanted to do was celebrate. But so I had my mother, I had my 11-year-old son, and I'm trying to keep all these balls in the air. And then you're dealing with what they call anticipatory grief because you know the end's coming. So you kind of start preparing. And as Mum deteriorated, she reverted to her girlhood and childhood. She started speaking Dutch and she started calling me Mama. And Declan, my son, was like, what's going on? And I would just talk to him and explain what's happening. And that was really powerful. I mean, I'm glad I was able to do that. And then Mum wanted to die at home. And this sort of feeds into something that I've written about what I see as the medicalization of birth and death. And again, that getting away from our instinctual, intuitive selves, you know, that we want to just hide that away in a ward, a sterile ward somewhere. And we were very fortunate that she was able to die at home and she could smell the ocean. And, but it was really difficult. It was like having a baby again, you know, when you have a newborn and you're up all night. Right. Well, she was on oxygen. So because her lungs were failing and she was so afraid at night, she would be up all night and I would be with her. Yeah. And then during the day, she felt calmer with the light and she'd be on the day bed and I would sort of try and get things organized. But it really was, as you say, this role reversal where I became the mother to my mother who became the child. And it was intense. And ironically, from the moment of diagnosis to her death was 9 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
So offering,
yes. So this is about those final weeks of her life. Offering. The stench of death permeates the air. Others stare, do not care. Hoopla, hoopla, the circus is in town. Mother is the clown on virtual display to the marauding hyenas, nostrils raised in anticipation. We battle stagnation and subjugation of a past that refused to acknowledge its own death, and still they circle, intent, carnivorous,
joined in a narcissism that knows no mercy. I stand at the periphery, blade drawn, mother is worn down by them. They are no friends. Chinese whispers follow us like incessant ghosts, determined to host a reunion. Blind to suffering, chaos reigns, and little minds share little thoughts. They threaten, hydra-like. My sword lops ahead, reveals the proliferation. To bed, to bed. One eye on the door, one ear to the floor. Evil eyes do their best but are unequal to the task. I don my mask as Artemis erupts in my heart, and I must start.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you became a caretaker and a gatekeeper for your mother.
Yeah, there were a couple of people, neighbours, who thought it was appropriate to come unannounced just to watch this spectacle. And I was just so angry, and no, it's not okay to pop in and see how she's doing. She's dying. Please let her die in peace. You know? I would have the back door locked, the front door. I would, if someone knocked, I would sort of tentatively pull the curtain across, and, I would make it really clear that none of this is okay. I mean, and normally I'm pretty magnanimous and egalitarian and open, but this was like, no, you're just crossing a line, and my anger was pretty intense, and of course I want to protect her and keep her safe, and don't want her to worry about this kind of stuff, but yeah, so there was a real lack of respect from some people that was really disturbing, and that's where offering came from. Yeah. If you look at the poem in the book, it's not this sort of nicely laid out. It's sort of jagged. It's all over the place. It's sort of one paragraph's to the left and one to the right, and the stanzas are all over the place, and that really reflects how I felt with my energy being pulled in different directions, and like this chaos and anger and myriad emotions, and trying to keep everything together for my mother and my son, and just feeling like, really like, Diana Artemis putting on my armor, and it's basically saying fuck off.
I love that. And I would love for you to share more about this book of poetry. We'll have you share a little bit more about that in a few minutes here. However, there are two more poems that I would love for you to read. Mm-hmm. So
first one.
Yeah. So sorry? Taking us from offering to beloved.
Beloved. Okay. Beloved. Why you chose me. Another scar to hide. I waited for a sign that never came. I cried. I died with you at the crossroads of hope and reason. Why I chose not to bear another cross. I waited for the ochre tide. I died. I cried for you and made amends for next season. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Many of us know this journey.
Yeah. This was a pregnancy that I terminated in 2004. And it was such a shock that I was pregnant. I had so many conflicting emotions. I had a 10-year-old son. I had no intention of staying with the father. And as I already was a single mother, I knew what that entailed. And I just really struggled with that decision. And it's funny what you remember. I remember my mum saying to me, she said, I would never tell you what to do and I would never judge you. The only thing I'll say is think about the one that's already here. And, yeah, that made an impact on me. because there were certain things I wanted to continue to be able to give him and provide for him. And I knew what it all entailed. So it's really beloved it's an elegy, it's a lament, there's grief, of course, and there's release. And when I was in the recovery room afterwards, there was a young woman there, and she said, "Do you think I'll ever be able to have children in the future?" And I could feel her guilt and this sort of idea of retribution. And I said to her, "Yes, I'm sure you will, because I had one when I lived in London when I was 23, and 5 years later I had a perfectly healthy boy." But it's such for me personally, it's been a charged and fraught issue, because I have friends who have desperately wanted to fall pregnant and have not been able to, and I've had to go to IVF and spend lots of money, and I felt incredible guilt.
Yeah. I understand. Yeah. When you know the journey already and you are a single parent and you know what it entails to hold all of that. Yes, I've been there. And I have, made a similar decision 11 years ago. So I understand what all of that experience is like. So yes, so again, life and death and the fire the fire of life that permeates all of it.
Yes.
And it's like the fire of this final poem that you'll read for us today.
Yeah, because interestingly, that pregnancy resulted from this last poem.
Wow.
Because this last poem is about a past lover of mine. We had this on-off thing for 15 years, but the chemistry, it's akin to a drug. Like, I craved him, and he worshipped every inch of me, and he would take his time, and he knew my body so well. I just craved his touch, and yeah, it took me a long, long time to let it go, to let him go, and to make my peace with it, and I learned so much from that relationship, and so grateful for it, because I can look back in hindsight and see, how different I was at the beginning of that 15-year period and how different I am now. Yeah, so this final poem is called La Petite Mort. His words percolate nascent layers of skin, watering her buds in mists of intent, hydrating her mind, circular in motion, rhythmic, purposeful. Boundaries coalesce, forming beads of heat and colour. Elemental and stormy, he senses her zenith. Synchronized, their auras collide, and two become one. And I love that, again, the eros and thanatos, sex and death, and the French term for orgasm is la petite mort, the little death. Yeah.
I just love that. That is so gorgeous. And I'm so grateful for your gift of language and the written word and your expression, and so honored that you were able to share this with us here on Ignite Intimacy and the community. Is your book of poetry published yet?
No, but it will be published on the 24th of this month, and there will be a live launch on Facebook on the 29th. But if Ignite Intimacy listeners go to my website, and I'll give you the link, they can go in the draw to win a free copy.
Great.
Which I will announce the winners at the live launch. So it's Deleonoraabel.com. So that's DELEONORAABEL.com/Ignite Intimacy. And your listeners can sign up and go into the draw to win a free copy.
Wonderful. Okay. And we'll have all the links in the show notes. I know we have a link for you for Facebook, the Little Black Book of Verse, and Instagram. We'll include all of that information in the show notes. And Deleonora, it has been such a pleasure to have you today.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I look forward to continuing our conversation, and just wishing you the best of the best and an abundance of blessings with the launch of your book and everything that's pulling you forward into, this glorious life. Thank you so much. And Ignite Intimacy community, thank you for joining us here today. Let's stay sweet and powerful and fiery and ignited inside with our own delicious and delicate and powerful juices of life in all that we be and say and do. Stay blessed, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at Ignite Intimacy. If you'd like to send us your comments or questions, please do so at hello@igniteintimacy.com. You can check us out online, igniteintimacy.com, and drop by and say hello. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you so much, Deleonora Abel. You are a gift.
Thank you. Thank you.
Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.